30 days left until the end of the world, spurred on by the mass production and use of Hopna, a miracle painkiller that's now mutating into a lethal toxin. Revealed in a video by the creator Dr. Skinner, we've got 30 days to find him or the world is over. Why would someone do such a thing? What is Skinner trying to achieve? Meaningless questions at the moment, especially if you die before getting to ask him. A future the Lazarus crew was created to combat, a capable Suicide Squad style group with only one objective in mind: find Skinner and save the world. So how come they never actually do it? Lazarus is a fundamentally broken show, which is not something I ever expected to say when the name attached most deeply to Lazarus is one Shinichiro Watanabe. As a stan of his work, indebted by what they mean to me, Lazarus serves as a stain on his record. One that might not change his legacy, but like everything else in his body of work, will truly be unforgettable. Lazarus has a problem with its storytelling where it doesn't really go anywhere, which is aggravatingly a pattern that's consistent throughout its whole run. The gang repeatedly will get a lead on something, be involved in a cool action set piece, before eventually discovering that their lead was a dud, sending the crew home with nothing gained. This is true from the outset and continues to ring true so loud that during episode 7, Hirsch literally states,
"Sadly, we're back to square one."
Which is a crazy thing to admit in an episode that's over the halfway point. It'd be one thing if during these episodes where there's not much plot development, our main cast jived well with one another, had a good rapport, had interesting character interactions that say something about who they are, but they don't. There isn't time for it. The show is so focused nearly every second on that episode's objective or setting up a lead for the next episode. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to figure out what exactly Doug's deal is. And ultimately, when these leads don't fucking go anywhere, what the hell are we doing? I'm not asking for a lot, because somewhere in the middle, I stopped caring about Lazarus and needing to be amazing. Detaching it from Champ Blue, and especially Bebop, shows that make me care about what should be some really mundane people. But then something amazing happens. Lazarus gets good? For weeks, I'd become accustomed to this exact room. A big projector screen, everyone gathered around, setting up the lead the gang was going to tackle that episode. Which is why, when episode 7 opens on them holding a barbecue on the rooftop, I thought, holy shit, are they actually doing, character stuff? They're bantering for a bit, asking each other about their ages, while Axel, being the overtop guy that he is, uses a flamethrower on the grill, blowing it up and ruining all the food. It's just a minute-and-a-half opener, and yet somehow there was more characterization in that than there was for the entire show so far. Miraculously, the rest of episode 7 actually goes somewhere too. After extracting coordinates from the Naga AI, the gang heads off to 4 remote islands, showcased beautifully in a 3-minute sequence that doesn't have a word of dialogue, and for a moment, Lazarus really works. It's not bombarding us with an action scene, and while the gang is still technically on duty while they're out here, there's nothing to be proactive about. They're kinda just here, in a space, together, taking a breather, which at this point I think is vital for the story. Because in the 6 episodes up to this point, you still don't really know anything about anyone. This breather peels back the curtain a little bit. We get to see the person behind the Lazarus agent, giving them the chance to think about how man has affected these places they're in, about whether or not this is something Skinner wanted them to see, or how it would kind of suck if the team disbanded after this. When you watch the sequence, it's almost like you're there with them, thinking how they think, feeling what they feel, all of a sudden caring about what happens to these people. The cherry on top is learning information that doesn't immediately feel like a dead end. Learning that Hirsch was part of the research team that helped Skinner create Hopna, while Axel could be the key to everything, feels like a legitimate step forward. What episode 7 sets up is a real chance, a way to come back from its earlier failures. Its goals of giving us something other than action to engage with, as well as actually moving the plot, are both succeeded with flying colors. It's a late turning point, but it's better than never, and now Lazarus can truly start. What if we threw all of that out the window? Firstly, we immediately fall back to having the plot not go anywhere because Christine gets kidnapped for an entire episode. And while frustrating, there are parts about episode 8 that I do like. How the distrust of Hirsch is what ultimately pushes the gang to go save Christine, and basically everything Christine has with Inga. And don't get me wrong, it's a real Apollo 13 moment when we make the save, but ever in the interest of time, especially when the show keeps reminding you, does this episode feel incredibly out of place. But that's alright, there's still a lot of time left, 12 days to be exact, so here comes a man eating steak and then having a 1.5-minute shot of him walking towards the camera. No, I am not fucking kidding. With what little time the show does have left, instead of really honing in on our main cast or trying to make the Skinner solve interesting, the Lazarus crew is running around doing whatever it is the plot needs them to be doing again, completely disinterested in telling a character-driven story or engaging with the themes put forth by episode 7. To add fuel to the fire is the addition of the character Soryu, who, let me remind everyone, is an assassin with dissociative identity disorder hired to kill Axel, spreading the what is already razor-thin time budget even thinner, and that's not even including all the Abel and Schneider stuff. There are more things happening in each episode than ever, and yet I'm the least engaged I've ever been, because Lazarus officially gives up on being a story trying to say something and just becomes a means to an end, showing some cool fights. And while I could talk about how confusing certain elements in Axel and Soryu's fight are, how it doesn't make sense that Lynn would nurse Elena back to health, and how unequivocally boring Schneider is as a villain, I just don't care. Because the story doesn't either. The big reveal of Lazarus is the fact that the Lazarus crew were all at the airport during the time of the Schiphol incident, mutating their genes and becoming resistant to the bioweapon the government had created. They essentially rose from the dead, now befitting the moniker of Lazarus. You see, it all came full circle. All you have to do is shoehorn in a last-minute addition that not only doesn't make sense because none of the members in Lazarus at any point bring up the fact that they were victims of a terrorist attack, besides Christine, but that's when she's talking to Inga, but also changes literally nothing about the story. Because it's not as if the Lazarus crew's blood became the key to making the cure. And because they're all assuming they're gonna die in 30 days anyway, the story isn't written with the fact that they're all immune in mind. It's a mute point. When we finally meet Skinner, it's anticlimactic as hell, considering that whether Skinner believes himself to be the 7th trumpeter or not, he's the mastermind behind the events of Lazarus. So in essence, the reason why we're all gathered here is down to him. Is it a point about the environment? Is it a point about how man without pain is already dead? For him to not give a take and kind of just leave that to us, while noble, isn't really interesting. I get that he didn't want his work to be used in a bioweapon, but it feels like that's his only point, and that's really disappointing. Because after all that laser-focused time we spent trying to get to him, the only conclusion we can really draw is, yeah, maybe it's not good to kill literally everyone. Lazarus does not end on a bang, nor does parting with it feel satisfying. It's a show more concerned about its fights than its characters, taking from its history, not remembering why it worked. There's a version out there of Lazarus that's more substance than style. A version where we care when an epic fight is happening, a version that dares to actually say something. But as it stands, we didn't get that version. Only a mere glimpse of what it could look like.